Brandon's voice cut through the conference room like a blade I didn't see coming. "Daniel's basically the janitor of operations," he announced, his grin spreading wider as scattered laughter rippled through the team. "Just cleans up everyone else's mess." More laughter erupted, louder this time. I felt my face burn hot as 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some amused, others uncomfortable. I forced my lips into something resembling a smile, but my hands trembled beneath the table where no one could see. 7 years. I'd given this company 7 years of 60-hour weeks, missed birthdays, postponed vacations. 7 years of building systems that kept this place running while Brandon took credit in executive meetings. The laughter continued as Brandon launched into another joke at my expense. I couldn't hear it anymore. The room tilted slightly as I stood, chair scraping against floor. Every face tracked my movement as I walked toward the door, my footsteps impossibly loud in my ears. Outside in the hallway, I finally let myself breathe. "You don't deserve that." The voice came from behind me, soft but firm. I turned to find Mia, one of our junior analysts, standing with her arms crossed. Her expression carried something between sympathy and anger. "Brandon shouldn't talk to you like that," she continued, stepping closer. "Everyone knows he'd be lost without your work." I shrugged, trying to dismiss it, trying to convince myself it didn't matter. But Mia's next words stopped me cold. "You know the CEO's nephew keeps asking for you, right?" My head snapped up. "What?" She glanced down the hallway, then back at me. "Evan Sinclair. He's been in 3 meetings this month asking specifically about your operational reports. My manager mentioned it yesterday." She paused, studying my reaction. "Someone important is paying attention to you, Daniel. Real attention, not whatever Brandon's doing." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing there with a strange mixture of confusion and something I hadn't felt in months. Hope, maybe, or curiosity. Something had shifted, though I didn't understand what yet. Brandon summoned me to his office the next morning. His tone was calm, almost friendly, which immediately set off warning bells. "Don't take everything so personally, Daniel," he said, leaning back in his leather chair with practiced casualness. "The team needs to blow off steam sometimes, you understand." I said nothing, just watched him carefully. His smile never reached his eyes. "Anyway, I've made some changes to the expansion team." He paused, watching for my reaction. "You're off it. I need people who can handle high-pressure situations without getting sensitive." The words landed like punches, but I kept my expression neutral. As he turned to his computer, presumably to dismiss me, I caught sight of his screen. A document was open, titled in bold letters I could read even from across the desk. "Succession Candidates Me." Below it, a detailed plan outlining how he'd position himself for the next senior partnership opening. My name appeared multiple times, always with negative annotations, always as an obstacle to remove. That evening I opened my personal email and found something unexpected. The sender was Evan Sinclair with a subject line that made my pulse quicken. "Heard what happened, let's talk." I stared at the screen for a full minute before clicking it open. The message was brief and direct. "Daniel, your operational designs have been circulating at the executive level. Brilliant work. I'm leading a confidential expansion project that needs someone with your specific expertise. Interested. This stays between us for now. Coffee tomorrow, 7 am at the grounds." I read it 3 times, looking for any hint of a setup or joke. But the email signature was legitimate, complete with his executive credentials and direct office line. This was real. The CEO's nephew, who sat on the strategy committee, wanted to meet with me, secretly. I typed my response with shaking fingers. "I'll be there." After hitting send, I sat back in my chair, my mind racing through possibilities. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than Brandon's petty office politics. Much bigger. The coffee shop was nearly empty at 7 in the morning. Evan arrived exactly on time, dressed casually but carrying an expensive leather portfolio. He got straight to business after we sat down. "I'm designing operational layouts for 3 new regional offices," he explained, sliding several documents across the table. "The board approved the expansion, but they're concerned about execution. Your systems are the only ones that have scaled successfully without major failures." I studied the plans, recognizing immediately where the weak points would be. "This is ambitious," I said carefully. "It would require someone dedicated full-time." Evan nodded. "I'm aware, which is why I want you secretly involved now, officially announced later." He met my eyes directly. "But I need one thing first." "What's that?" "Everything in writing," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "Every contribution I make, every system I design, time-stamped and documented." Evan smiled, genuine this time. "Smart, done." He leaned back. "When this goes through, Daniel, someone's getting promoted. Might as well be the person who actually does the work." Brandon launched his smear campaign the following week. It started subtly. Comments dropped in passing during meetings. "Daniel's great with details but lacks the big picture thinking we need in leadership." Then it escalated. Emails began circulating to department heads, carefully worded to seem concerned rather than malicious. "Just wanted to flag some issues with Daniel's recent performance. He seems overwhelmed by pressure and resistant to growth opportunities." Another message to HR mentioned my poor interpersonal skills and inability to collaborate effectively. Each email was copied to just enough people to spread the narrative without seeming like gossip. I saw them all. Someone, I suspected Mia, was forwarding them to me anonymously. I said nothing, made no defense, filed no complaint, sent no angry responses. Instead, I did something Brandon wouldn't expect. I printed every single email, every message, every carefully constructed lie. I noted dates, recipients, and context. Then I locked them all in my home safe, building a timeline of exactly how Brandon was trying to destroy my reputation while I was quietly building the company's future. The first direct attack came during a critical week. I'd submitted an operational efficiency report directly to the CEO's office, something I did quarterly. But when it reached the executive team, something was wrong. The recommendations were garbled, numbers didn't match my analysis, and entire sections contradicted themselves. It made me look completely incompetent. The CEO sent a company-wide email, copying everyone from executives to team leads. "Can someone explain what happened with this report? This doesn't meet our standards." My stomach dropped. 20 people were now seeing my name attached to garbage I didn't write. But I'd learned to protect myself. I replied to the same distribution list, attaching the original report with its metadata intact. "This is the version I submitted yesterday at 3:47 p.m. The file properties show someone modified it at 9:15 a.m. today. I'm happy to discuss the discrepancies." The response thread went silent. In my inbox, a new message appeared from an unfamiliar executive assistant. The CEO would like the original file sent directly to his personal email. "Thank you." 2 days later, I received an email that wasn't meant for me. Someone in the executive suite had accidentally hit reply all instead of forward. The thread was a conversation between the CEO and his chief operating officer. Daniel kept his composure during the report incident. Interesting approach. Most people would have panicked or complained to HR. Let's see how far Brandon pushes him before he breaks. My hands froze on the keyboard. They knew. The CEO knew exactly what Brandon was doing, and he was watching it happen. Deliberately. This wasn't negligence or ignorance. It was a test. Some kind of evaluation I didn't fully understand but was apparently in the middle of passing. I read the email chain 3 more times, searching for more context, but that was all the accidental forward included. The message felt like pulling back a curtain on a stage I didn't know I was performing on. Whatever game was being played, the rules were more complex than I'd realized, and the stakes were clearly higher than my pride. Brandon's next move was crueler, more personal. He stopped by my desk Thursday afternoon with false enthusiasm. "Hey Daniel, can you present the quarterly operations updates at tomorrow's leadership meeting? 10 o'clock, main conference room. Really want the team to hear directly from you." Something felt wrong, but I agreed. I spent that evening preparing a presentation, reviewing data, anticipating questions. I arrived at the conference room Friday at 9:55 a.m., laptop ready, notes organized. The room was empty, Completely dark and silent. I checked my phone, confirmed the time and location. This was definitely the main conference room, and it was definitely 10 o'clock. Then I heard it. Laughter echoing from down the hallway, unmistakably from Brandon's office. Multiple voices, the whole team apparently gathered there instead. I stood in that empty room, understanding flooding through me. There was no meeting. There never had been. This was just another humiliation, another way to make me look foolish. But this time I was ready. I pulled out my phone and recorded the empty conference room, timestamp visible. Then I walked toward Brandon's office and recorded the laughter leaking through the door, their voices clearly audible discussing how Daniel probably showed up with a whole presentation. Monday morning, HR scheduled a mandatory performance conversation. The email came from Brandon's request, though it was phrased as routine. I arrived at the small conference room to find Patricia, our head of human resources, waiting with a thick folder. But before the meeting officially started, she did something unexpected. She stood up, closed the door carefully, and walked to where I sat. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Daniel, you're being set up. Brandon has submitted 3 formal complaints about your performance this month." She paused, glancing at the closed door. "But here's what you need to know. Every single one has been reviewed by someone high up, someone above my authority level, and every single attempt to put you on a performance improvement plan has been quietly blocked." My eyes widened. "Who?" She shook her head. "I don't know exactly, but the emails come from the executive floor, and they're not suggestions. They're orders. Someone powerful is protecting you." She sat back down, opened her folder, and raised her voice to normal volume. "So, let's discuss your excellent work on the expansion project, shall we?" The dinner invitation came that Wednesday, a personal email from the CEO himself, not his assistant. "Daniel, I'd like to discuss your future with the company. Tomorrow evening, 7 p.m., the Capitol Grill, just us." I arrived 10 minutes early, palms sweating despite the cool evening air. The CEO, Marcus Hendricks, was already seated in a private corner booth. He gestured for me to sit, and we made small talk until after ordering. Then he leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "I have one question for you, Daniel. Why didn't you report any of Brandon's behavior?" I chose my words carefully. "Because if I'm truly leadership material, I should be able to handle workplace conflict without running to HR or management every time someone's difficult." He studied me for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Most people would have complained, filed formal grievances, made noise. "Most people aren't trying to prove they belong in leadership," I replied. Something shifted in his expression, a slight smile that suggested I'd given the right answer to a test I didn't know I was taking. He said nothing more about it, but the conversation shifted to my vision for operational efficiency, and we talked for 2 hours. The rumor started spreading through the office like wildfire the following week. A senior partner position was opening, the first new equity partnership in 3 years. Brandon's entire demeanor changed overnight. He started acting friendlier, though only when certain people were watching. He'd greet me in the hallways with forced warmth, ask about my weekend in the break room, even compliment my work in team meetings. But the facade was transparent. His eyes remained cold, calculating. He was performing for an audience, trying to scrub away months of documented hostility. The most obvious move came Friday afternoon. Brandon sent an expensive bottle of whiskey to the CEO's office, accompanied by a handwritten note about celebrating the company's growth and future. The gift basket was elaborate, clearly expensive, wrapped with a card visible from the hallway. Half the floor saw it being delivered. I watched from my desk, recognizing desperation when I saw it. Brandon knew something had shifted, knew his position wasn't as secure as he'd assumed. And he was panicking in the most obvious way possible, trying to buy favor he should have earned. Brandon's final attempt to break me was almost impressive in its cruelty. Monday morning, I discovered my project timeline had been completely rearranged. 2 major deadlines, each requiring days of work, were now both due by Tuesday end of business. 24 hours to complete what should have taken a week. The scheduling change came through official channels, marked urgent with Brandon's signature on the approval. I didn't argue or complain. I just started working, stayed in the office until midnight Monday, survived on coffee and determination. Worked through lunch Tuesday, double-checking every calculation, every projection, every detail. By 5 p.m. Tuesday, I submitted both completed projects, comprehensive and thorough. I was exhausted, my eyes burning, my back aching from hours hunched over my desk, but I'd finished. Both deadlines met, both deliverables exceeding standards. At 3 p.m. Wednesday, my phone buzzed with a Slack notification, a message from Brandon. "Too bad no one will know you did that." I stared at the screen, then smiled for the first time in days. Someone would know. In fact, someone already did. I spent Wednesday morning compiling everything. Every documented report I'd created with timestamps intact. Every email Brandon had altered with the metadata proving the changes. Every project I'd completed that he'd claimed credit for, with the digital fingerprints showing my authorship. Every instance of the smear campaign with dates and recipients. I organized it chronologically, added a brief context paragraph to each section, and attached supporting evidence. Then I sent it all directly to the CEO's personal email address. The subject line was simple. Not a complaint, just transparency. No accusations, no demands for action, no emotional appeals. Just facts, timestamps, and documentation. 3 hours later, a response arrived. 2 words only. "Thank you." That afternoon, I noticed a change in the office atmosphere. Several executives who'd never acknowledged me before nodded as I passed in the hallway. Patricia from HR smiled knowingly when we crossed paths at the coffee station. Brandon's assistant kept glancing at me nervously, then quickly looking away when I noticed. Something was moving behind the scenes, something I couldn't quite see but could definitely feel. The air itself seemed different, charged with an anticipation I didn't fully understand but was starting to recognize. The executive board presentation was scheduled for Friday morning. Brandon had been preparing for weeks, treating it as his coronation moment. I wasn't supposed to be there, not officially, but Evan had asked me to attend for operational context. Brandon presented my expansion analysis, the regional efficiency models, the integration frameworks I'd spent months developing. He spoke with complete confidence, gesturing at charts and graphs, fielding questions with practiced ease. Except every single document had one problem he hadn't checked. Metadata. Every chart showed author, Daniel Reeves, in the file properties. Every spreadsheet had my name embedded in the creation details. Every presentation slide was tracked back to my computer, my login, my timestamps. A board member named Catherine leaned forward midway through Brandon's presentation, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she examined her tablet. "Brandon," she interrupted, her voice cutting through his speech. "Can you explain why every file you're presenting shows Daniel Reeves as the author?" The room went silent. Brandon's face drained of color. He stammered something about collaboration and team efforts, but his voice cracked. The confidence evaporated in seconds. Catherine looked directly at me. "Daniel, were you aware Brandon was presenting your work?" Every executive turned to watch my response. The CEO called us both into a private meeting room immediately after the presentation. No one else, just Marcus Hendricks standing at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Brandon started talking immediately, trying to explain, justify, contextualize. Marcus held up one hand and Brandon fell silent. The CEO turned to Brandon directly. "Tell me one system we've successfully implemented in the past 2 years that Daniel did not build or significantly contribute to." Brandon opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Nothing came out. Seconds stretched into uncomfortable silence. I said nothing, didn't move, barely breathed. Just watched as Brandon searched desperately for an answer that didn't exist. Finally, Marcus spoke again. "That's what I thought." He turned to me. "Daniel, thank you for your time. You can return to your desk." As I stood to leave, I caught Brandon's expression. It was the look of a man watching his entire carefully constructed world collapse. The CEO didn't dismiss him, didn't say anything else, just remained standing there in that small room as I walked out and closed the door behind me. I had no idea what happened next in that room, but by the afternoon, everyone knew something significant had occurred. Brandon's breakdown was spectacular and public. It started Thursday afternoon with raised voices echoing from his office, then progressing to him slamming his door so hard a picture fell off the hallway wall. By Friday, he was openly hostile, snapping at assistants, sending aggressive emails, making barely veiled accusations in team meetings. People started avoiding him, taking longer routes through the office to bypass his area. The whispers grew louder as the week progressed. "Did Daniel finally beat him?" someone murmured near the coffee station. "About time someone stood up to Brandon's bullying," another voice added at lunch. I kept my head down, continued my work, and said nothing to anyone, but I felt the shift in how people treated me. Respect where there'd been pity, interest where there'd been dismissal. Several colleagues who'd laughed at Brandon's jokes now approached me with project questions, asking my opinion, actually listening to my responses. The power dynamic had fundamentally changed, and everyone recognized it except possibly Brandon himself, who seemed increasingly desperate and unhinged as the days passed. Something was coming. Everyone could feel it approaching like a storm on the horizon. The announcement came Monday morning via email to the entire senior staff. Board meeting Tuesday, 2 p.m. Partnership decision to be finalized. Tuesday arrived with unusual tension throughout the office. People gathered in clusters, speculating quietly. Everyone knew two candidates were being considered. Brandon, the charismatic director with years of visibility and executive presence, and me, the quiet operations manager most people had barely noticed until recently. At 2 p.m., the executive board convened in the main conference room with glass walls. We could see them gathering, see the CEO presenting two sealed folders, see the board members reviewing documents with serious expressions. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Through the glass, we watched one board member, an older woman named Helena, make an impassioned statement. We couldn't hear words, but her gestures were emphatic. She pointed at one folder repeatedly, then the other, her expression stern. Other board members nodded, some taking notes. The CEO listened carefully, occasionally interjecting but mostly allowing the discussion to flow. Finally, they took a vote. Show of hands around the table quickly tallied. The decision was unanimous. Whatever they decided, every single board member agreed. The meeting adjourned, and we all waited. Wednesday morning brought the company-wide announcement. All hands meeting, Thursday 10 a.m., main auditorium. Attendance mandatory. Major announcement regarding company leadership. The speculation reached fever pitch. Brandon spent Wednesday walking through the office with renewed confidence, shaking hands, making jokes, acting like the announcement was already his. I watched him, recognizing the performance. He'd convinced himself the partnership was secured, that his years of visibility and relationship building had won despite recent complications. Thursday arrived. The auditorium filled slowly, people claiming seats, whispering predictions. I sat toward the back, trying to remain inconspicuous. Brandon positioned himself in the front row, center seat, clearly visible to everyone. His suit was expensive, new probably, his smile broad and ready. The CEO stepped onto the small stage at exactly 10 a.m. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the space. "Today we're announcing a significant change to our partnership structure." Brandon straightened in his seat, preparing to stand. "Congratulations to our newest equity partner." Marcus paused, his eyes scanning the room until they found me in the back. "Daniel Reeves." The auditorium erupted. The applause started scattered, then built into something overwhelming. People stood, not just politely but enthusiastically. I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd heard. Several colleagues near me were smiling, some actually had tears in their eyes. The junior analyst who'd watched Brandon's bullying for years looked vindicated. I glanced toward the front row. Brandon had stopped moving entirely. His smile had vanished, replaced by blank shock. His face had drained of all color, his hands gripping the armrests of his seat. He looked like someone had physically struck him. The CEO gestured for me to come forward. My legs felt unstable as I stood, making my way down the aisle toward the stage. More applause erupted as I passed. People reached out to touch my shoulder, murmur congratulations, show support. I'd never experienced anything like it. When I reached the front, I had to walk directly past Brandon's seat. For a moment, I considered just walking by, ignoring him entirely. But something made me stop. I stood in front of him, and he slowly looked up at me, his expression devastated. The entire auditorium watched our exchange, the room falling silent again to see what would happen between us in this moment. I leaned down slightly, keeping my voice low enough that only Brandon could hear. "Don't worry," I said quietly. "I don't plan to humiliate you." His eyes widened slightly, confusion mixing with the shock. "I just won't let you humiliate anyone else again." I straightened up and continued toward the stage where Marcus waited with an extended hand. He shook mine firmly, then handed me a leather portfolio folder. I opened it, scanning the first page, and felt my breath catch. It was a new organizational chart. Brandon's director position now had a dotted line reporting structure leading directly to my new partner role. Every initiative he'd controlled, every team he'd managed, every project he'd claimed, now required my approval and oversight. Marcus leaned close as the applause continued. "Character matters more than performance," he said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Though in your case, we got both." Brandon slowly stood from his seat and began moving toward the back exit, his head lowered, his confident posture completely collapsed. Several people watched him go, and some expressions showed pity, but most showed satisfaction. Justice finally served. I stood on that stage, not gloating or celebrating, just quietly accepting what I'd earned. 7 years of patient work, of integrity, of building rather than destroying. It had all led to this single moment of complete vindication. The reception afterward was surreal. Colleagues I'd worked beside for years suddenly treating me differently, with respect that felt both validating and strange. Mia approached with a knowing smile. "I told you someone important was paying attention," she said. "Evan Sinclair found me near the coffee station. The expansion project officially starts Monday. Good thing we already have the real architect leading it." He shook my hand warmly. "Welcome to the partnership." That evening, I sat in my office for the first time since the announcement. The same desk I'd occupied for 7 years, but everything felt different now. I thought about Brandon, about his years of bullying and credit stealing, about how he'd mistaken visibility for value and performance for character. I thought about my own journey, about choosing documentation over confrontation, transparency over complaints, patience over revenge. Marcus had been right. This was a test, one I hadn't known I was taking until I'd already passed it. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Congratulations, Daniel. You earned every bit of this. Some of us have been watching longer than you know." Helena, board member, I smiled, set down my phone, and looked out my office window at the city below. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to prove myself worthy of this position. But tonight, I just sat in the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd won the right way, without compromising my integrity, without becoming the villain, just by being consistently, persistently, undeniably valuable. The janitor had become the partner, and I'd done it by cleaning up everyone's mess better than anyone else could.